It happened live. Not in a replay. Not in the frame-by-frame reconstruction that follows controversial plays hours after they occur, when analysts have had time to slow the footage and draw the telestration lines and deliver their verdicts from the comfortable distance of a broadcast desk. It happened in real time, at full speed, in front of every camera that Chase Field had positioned to capture a baseball game and instead captured something else entirely. 54,000 people in the stadium saw it simultaneously. Millions more watching on television saw it simultaneously. The broadcast team, seasoned professionals who have narrated decades of baseball between them, who have seen collisions and injuries and every variety of frightening moment this sport can produce, went silent simultaneously. Not the practiced pause of broadcasters creating dramatic space. The involuntary silence of people who have just seen something that has temporarily disconnected the part of the brain that produces words from the part that processes what the eyes are sending. 3 seconds of silence on live television. 3 seconds that said everything the broadcasters couldn't. The game had been close through 7 innings. Dodgers and Diamondbacks, a matchup that has carried extra weight since the audio recording, since the suspensions, since the accumulation of history between these two franchises that has made every at-bat between them feel like it exists inside a larger narrative about respect and consequence and the boundaries of competition. The kind of game where every play is watched a little more carefully than usual. Where the officials are a little more alert. Where both dugouts are a little more aware of the temperature of the room. Ohtani had been on base twice. A walk in the second inning, worked to a full count, the kind of at-bat that wears a pitcher down incrementally even when it produces no hit, and a double in the fifth that had driven in a run and sent a ripple through the Diamondbacks' dugout that was visible on camera. He was running the bases in the eighth when it happened. The ball had been hit sharply to right field, a gap shot that sent the right fielder scrambling and set Ohtani in motion from first with the kind of immediate, committed acceleration that base runners need when the ball is in the gap and the play will be decided by margins of a single step. He had read it correctly. His jump was good. His route around second was efficient. He was 3 steps from third base when the Diamondbacks' first baseman appeared in his path. Not in a position required by the play. Not fielding a ball. Not occupying the space that a first baseman occupies when the defensive geometry of a baseball play places him there by necessity. In a position that the ball's trajectory had not created and the defensive situation had not required. In Ohtani's path. Deliberately. What followed happened in less than 1 second. The collision was full force. Ohtani, running at the complete speed of a professional athlete who has committed entirely to a base-running decision, met an obstacle that his body had no time to process and his momentum had no capacity to avoid. The physics of it were unambiguous: 2 objects, one moving at maximum velocity, one stationary and positioned precisely to intercept that velocity, and the outcome was what the physics demanded. He went down hard. The sound reached the microphones before the image fully registered, the specific, terrible sound of a collision that everyone in the stadium recognized instinctively as different from the routine physical contact that baseball produces constantly. Heavier. More final. The sound of something happening that should not have happened. The stadium noise, which had been substantial through 7 innings of a close game, stopped. Not diminished. Stopped. 54,000 people producing silence in the same instant, the involuntary, collective response of a crowd that has witnessed something that has moved them out of the register of spectators and into something more elemental. Something that precedes sports loyalty and team affiliation and all the constructed allegiances that bring people to baseball stadiums. The response of human beings watching another human being get hurt. The broadcast team found their voices after 3 seconds. What they said in the immediate aftermath was fragmented in the way that live commentary is fragmented when the situation exceeds the frameworks the commentators arrived with. Words like down and not moving and medical staff and oh no and other phrases that were less analysis than vocalization, the sounds of people watching something unfold in real time without the buffer of editing or delay. The Dodgers' dugout emptied before the 3rd second had passed. Roberts was on the field before the umpires had fully responded. Moving with a speed that the camera caught clearly, not the measured pace of a manager approaching a mound conference but something faster and more primal, the movement of a person who has seen something and is responding to it before any professional calculation has had time to intervene. Trainers followed immediately behind him. Then players. Then more staff. The field filled with blue in the specific, alarming way that fields fill when the situation has moved beyond baseball and become something else. The Diamondbacks' first baseman stood approximately 15 feet from where Ohtani had fallen. He did not move toward the fallen player. He did not make any gesture of concern or acknowledgement or the basic human response that collision situations typically produce even between players who dislike each other intensely. He stood, arms at his sides, watching. The cameras caught that too. Ohtani was conscious. This was the first information that traveled from the field to the broadcast team to the watching public, the fundamental, relieving fact that the worst possibility was not the reality. He was conscious. He was responding to the trainers. He was not, in the initial assessment made on the field, in the category of injured that requires immediate immobilization and the kind of response that sends stadiums into genuine fear. He was helped from the field rather than carried. Slowly. Carefully. With the particular attention of medical professionals who are managing both an injury and an athlete who does not want to be seen as more compromised than he is, who is, in the specific way that competitors process physical difficulty, already trying to minimize what has happened before anyone has had time to assess it properly. The crowd, the same crowd that had gone silent 30 seconds earlier, produced a sound as he walked off the field. Not the sound of a game. Something more sustained and less specific. The sound of 54,000 people communicating something that the situation had made them feel and that the stadium had given them no other outlet to express. He acknowledged it once. A brief lift of his hand. The smallest possible gesture toward the people making the sound. Then he disappeared into the tunnel. The investigation began before the game ended. The umpires had issued an immediate ejection, the first and most visible consequence, the one that removed the first baseman from the field within minutes of the collision. But everyone watching understood that an ejection was the beginning of the response, not the response itself. That the conversation about what had happened, about whether it was accidental, about what the footage showed, about the context established by everything that had occurred between these two franchises in recent weeks, was going to happen at a level and with a seriousness that a single ejection could not contain. The league office confirmed that night that a formal investigation had been opened. The language of the confirmation was notably direct, none of the careful hedging that typically characterizes official statements about ongoing investigations, none of the both sides framing that institutions deploy to avoid the appearance of prejudging outcomes. Direct. Almost blunt. The footage was being reviewed. All available angles. The full context of the play, including the positioning of the first baseman before, during, and after the moment of contact. The investigation would be thorough. The investigation would be swift. And the investigation would produce consequences proportionate to what the evidence revealed. The evidence revealed everything. MLB's announcement arrived 41 hours after the collision. It was issued simultaneously to all 30 teams, to the Players Association, to the media, and, in a departure from standard protocol that was itself a communication, directly to the Dodgers organization before the general release. A permanent ban. Not a suspension with a specific game number attached. Not 50 games or 100 games or the kind of penalty that exists on a continuum with previous disciplinary actions and implies the possibility of return. A permanent ban from participation in Major League Baseball in any capacity. The announcement was 3 paragraphs long. The first paragraph described the investigation and its findings. The second paragraph summarized the evidence, the footage, the positioning analysis, the context established by prior incidents, the determination that the collision had been deliberate and premeditated rather than incidental to any baseball play. The third paragraph stated the consequence. Permanent ineligibility. In the history of MLB disciplinary action, permanent bans occupy a specific and severe category. They are not issued for poor judgment or competitive excess or even for most forms of deliberate rule-breaking. They are issued when the league has determined that what occurred falls outside the category of things that baseball's normal corrective machinery is designed to address. When the behavior is not a mistake to be learned from but a choice that cannot be permitted to exist inside the sport. The first baseman's name, attached to that determination, joined a list that no professional baseball player aspires to join. A list that speaks not just to what a player did but to what the sport decided he represented, to the line he crossed and the finality of what crossing it meant. The Diamondbacks organization issued a statement expressing respect for the league's process and declining to contest the finding. There was no appeal. The Players Association, which represents every player in the sport regardless of what that player has done, confirmed that no appeal would be filed, a decision that itself communicated something, because the association files appeals reflexively, as a matter of institutional practice, because the process exists and the option exists and the use of both is considered standard. Not this time. Not for this. Ohtani's status was updated the following morning. The medical assessment, completed after the game with the thoroughness that the situation demanded, had produced results that landed differently depending on whether you were reading them as good news or as a narrowly avoided catastrophe. No structural damage. No fractures. Significant soft tissue injury to the shoulder that had absorbed the primary impact of the collision, the shoulder that, for a two-way player whose pitching relies on the specific mechanical integrity of that joint, was not the shoulder anyone would have chosen as the site of significant soft tissue injury. He would miss time. How much time was not specified in the initial assessment, because soft tissue injuries exist on a spectrum and heal according to their own logic rather than anyone's preferred timeline. He would miss time. For a team built around his presence. For a franchise that had structured its October plans around his dual availability. For a player who had never missed significant time in his American career and who processed the idea of sitting out games with the same relationship most people have to a minor illness, theoretically understandable, personally unacceptable. He would miss time. Roberts held no formal press conference that evening. He issued a single statement through the organization. 11 sentences. The first 10 addressed Ohtani's health, the team's response, and the medical process going forward. They were measured and informative and said everything that needed to be said about the baseball situation. The 11th sentence said something else. There are moments that test what this sport is and what this sport is willing to protect. Tonight was one of those moments. The league's response was the right one. 11 sentences. The 11th was the one that traveled. In the days that followed, the footage circulated continuously. The collision itself. The 3 seconds of broadcast silence. The crowd going quiet. Roberts running onto the field. The first baseman standing 15 feet away with his arms at his sides. Ohtani's hand raised once toward the crowd as he walked into the tunnel. That image, the smallest possible acknowledgement, offered in the middle of pain, directed at 54,000 people who had just watched something terrible happen to him, became the image that defined the week. Not the collision. Not the announcement. Not the permanent ban or the investigation or any of the institutional machinery that had processed the event and produced its consequences. The hand. Raised once. Just barely. Already disappearing into the tunnel. Saying without words what Shohei Ohtani always says without words. I am still here.